Have you ever tried the carnivore or wanted to? I put the science to the test and did 6 weeks of carnivore and 6 weeks of vegan, and the results were absolutely insane. If you haven't watched episode 1 yet, go back and check out the intro where I discussed everything with the dietitian and the doctor about what I need to keep in mind before starting the carnivore. Now, this video is after 6 weeks of carnivore where we discuss my results.
Here we are. We are 7 weeks later. It's started the carnivore diet.
Yeah.
How was the experience for you?
Honestly, I was positively surprised. My cravings went down. Like the first 2 weeks, maybe I was really still craving chocolate. But other than that, honestly, it was very easy to manage my hunger. It was actually difficult for me to eat everything on the meal plan.
Sure.
Because I wasn't hungry, which was quite new for me because I'm usually always hungry. It was nice to be able to just almost listen to my body when it's hungry, when it isn't. The only difficulty was just in terms of the fats, to know exactly like how much is too much, because it's not always quantifiable, and that's like this piece of fat on the rump versus that piece. But I didn't feel like that hindered me at all. I can already feel on my clothing that I lost weight, so I don't think it was an issue in terms of balancing that. Interesting cooking and stuff like that, like when we had friends over to prepare this nice luscious meal for them, and then they have the salad and the butternut and beetroot and what with the meat, and then I'm here with my piece of steak. But what was interesting is I got fewer questions about it than I expected. I think people would much rather, especially where we live, in South Africa being a braai country, they would much rather ask questions like, why aren't you eating meat?
Yeah, why are you not eating meat?
We're like, oh, you're not eating it? Oh, but you eat meat, that's fine. People aren't that curious, which is interesting. But other than that, really good experience. Also, on the digestive side, much better than I expected. Actually, completely normal, except for 1 week in the middle. I don't know if I maybe had some bad chicken or whether there was an adaptive phase, but there was 1 week in the middle where I had a bit of diarrhea. Sorry if I'm being too direct.
It is exactly what it is.
But other than that, my body adapted really quick, really well. On the exercise front, I was not as out of breath and things as I expected, because I obviously started very slowly and surely with the exercises, but in let's say the first 2 weeks, I could feel that my endurance isn't as good, but then my body also really quickly adapted to that, and I don't know, is it just me becoming fitter, because I never went over an hour's exercise or stuff like that, so I don't know whether the glucose stores would really make a difference in that amount of exercise. And I took your advice on having a bit more dairy on the days that I exercised. So I think that also maybe normalized it. My deep sleep improved. I would go from 0 to 100 in 5 minutes, because I'm normally a very restless sleeper actually, and that improved very much, which was a very unexpected consequence of the diet. Also, my skin texture improved, and all the spots that I had disappeared, and then I could see them reappearing the moment I started taking sugar and stuff again. And another interesting thing is also almost no PMS symptoms.
Wow.
Which was also a great improvement, because normally I can feel when that part of my cycle is approaching in terms of cravings and irritability and things, which this time it came as quite a surprise, so all in all very positive. I missed vegetables, I missed the diversity of the diet, but I didn't crave it, which was quite positive.
Fantastic. And energy levels, how was that?
Also brilliant, through the roof. And I could see that with my research as well, because it's normally big words and they try to be very scientific sounding. Just when you're tired, it can get just horrible to read and keep focus. Where I didn't find the same experience, my focus levels truly went up. I think it's a mixture of the non-fluctuations in blood sugar and the more restful sleep when we slept. And I've been actually feeling the past 3 days a bit more lethargic since incorporating carbohydrates into my diet again, but which is normal. It's just a normal adaptation phase.
Fantastic. If you're looking at health, right? So I know that you did your blood work, so we'll go through that now. But what I need to check is your gut health good? And you said mostly yes. How was your energy levels? Quite good. How was sleep? Quite good. While you exercise, you felt you could still get a good quality session in there as well. So that's fantastic. So from also an outside standpoint, then you also said you feel you've lost weight, all those aspects. So we'll check the scan just now.
Yeah.
But also we need to check what's going on inside.
Yes.
So that's how the blood works is quite important. That's I'm so glad that you did it. Would you like us to then go through that?
Yeah, I'm curious and excited and nervous all at the same time.
Nice. So the last one that we did, what's very interesting is we often find that with something like a ketogenic diet, or like let's say a carnivore diet, is that your CLP, your C-reactive protein inflammation markers, can come down. And we've seen that here. It needs to be under 5, it was at 2, now it's at 1.
Yeah.
But before we go further, what's so interesting, like you mentioned with your skin, is that we've got to ask ourselves, is it something you had like more of, or was it something that you cut out? So with this as well, sometimes we've got to now think, yes, your inflammation markers could be lower, but was it something that you were maybe having, such as sugar, or is it actually the meat itself that just having more protein, for example, would have an impact? So interesting things for us to look at here, but the diet is not that high in calcium. It does have your cheese, but
not limiting amount.
Limiting
not
amount.
the extent that I had.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially from where you came from.
Yeah.
So I'm not too surprised at all to see that your calcium and adjusted is a bit more accurate for us to look at. You were really good. You were kind of on the high range there. We wanted normal range is 2.15 to 2.5. Now it was 2.39, which is quite high. Now it's still within the normal range, but it is quite lower. And it is only 6-7 weeks, so we have to ask ourselves long term, like let's say if you did this for several months, if your bone minerals go down, would it put you at a risk of osteoporosis? So it's very interesting that you could do the blood work. So thank you so much for that. Albumin's normal, but now cholesterol, because that's the big hoo-ha, the biggest hoo-ha, so to say, about the carnivore diet, because all the saturated fats, all your solid fats at room temperature, your cholesterol is going to go through the roof. But we do know what we spoke about from our last session, it's a lot more about the quality of that. So, and yes, your cholesterol did go up. So as a healthcare professional, the alarm goes off, is this a concern? But we have to look at the quality. So we wanted under 5, it was at 6, now it's at 6.2. But let's look at the quality, because triglycerides have decreased. Now that is a little bit more linked to your blood sugar levels, sugar intake. So and obviously on your diet that you follow, that will go down. So I'm not surprised at all that that's come down. And your healthy cholesterol, your HDL, has gone up, right? And also if we looked at those, there's a tick marks there, is that when we did this calculations at the last session with regards to where the size of your LDL particles are, those play a big role in that. So I'm very curious to do that calculation again. But unsurprisingly, your LDL cholesterol has gone up. And you do want your total cholesterol to be under 5, and your LDL alone is at 4.7. So we have to now have a look at that. But let's do that calculation again. Now your triglycerides are lower and your HDL is higher, so you don't even need to do the maths. That ratio will be really good. That's improving. So that gives us more of an idea of the size of the particles. So in that essence, even though your total cholesterol's gone up, the biggest risk factor, which is the LDL size particles, are likely bigger than smaller. So that's what's really nice if you could just look at the breakdown of that. But now as well, if we're looking at the cleaning up ability, so to say, because ideally we wanted about 0.25, yours is 0.27 beforehand.
Yes.
Okay, so 0.27, we'll just remember that. Now if we do the same one, it's even better. So again, this is what's so interesting about the research.
Are you surprised or not?
Look, I think it all depends in context. Because
I exercised and I cut out sugar. It's quite obvious that I would be healthier, but I'm still just asking.
No, so let me put it this way. If you were here and you were morbidly obese, only had chips, just had takeaways, I would expect a massive, massive change. But because you were already doing a lot of things quite well already, kind of in your normal diet, it is very good to see that you have improved. And not by, I don't say that much, but the fact that it's only been 6 weeks and you've already seen a positive change in this. This is really good to see. But if you were to ask a bunch of dietitians, let's say 2 years ago, you would expect that everything would be completely out.
And we'll go with a prescription.
Like you really see the Aspavor being like prescribed. This is good to see. Are you proud of yourself?
Yeah, well, I'm happy. I was quite nervous because obviously I did expect cholesterol to go up. That's consistent with research. I did expect the LDL cholesterol to go up. That's also consistent with the research about saturated fat, but I didn't know what the HDL and the risk factor would do. So I'm positively surprised that it did actually improve, which is also consistent with the latest research. Like you said, 2 years ago it would have been a different story. It's only now that it's come out. So I'm very happy that this sort of aligns with my expectations. But I'm also very open to the fact that, of course, exercise and those things will also improve it. So I'm not attributing it to the diet at all. So yeah, I'm quite happy, and it gives me a good starting point to also now see what happens the following 6 weeks.
Yes, exactly. So on that, it's going to be good so that we can do the full picture here. Let's look at the rest here. So there's not, just a few more lines here. So what many people would find surprising about these results with the iron is just that you're basically just eating meat. Would we not think that because meat has a lot of iron, that your iron stores should like really be going up?
Yeah.
And ironically, I'll tell you why this happens.
Yes, I'm quite
is that the iron levels, look, they're normal. It's not that we're trying to get it to the high level, but it technically decreased a bit.
Yes.
That is quite odd. But a big likely reason for it is that heme iron, which we normally get from our, let's say, sources that have a heartbeat, so meat, chicken, fish, so what you've been eating essentially, then we absorb about 15% of that, roughly. Then your non-heme iron, which is basically iron sources without a heartbeat, so basically your beetroot and your spinach and your cabbage and your beans, we absorb roughly between 3 and 8%. So it's not as much. But then you can say, but before I was eating those things, now I'm only just eating meat, why would it go down? But interesting, what you see in the research is that if you have heme iron and non-heme iron at the same time, as in the intestines, at the point where iron is absorbed at the same time, you actually absorb more iron.
That's fantastic.
So even though you've been having more heme iron, which you absorb more of, but because it's something that you're not having, it didn't actually go up.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
Yeah.
Do you know what the mechanism of action is there?
I'm not actually. We just know that at the source, how it goes through, it just helps the absorption.
Well, that's also proving a point there.
And on top of that, another interesting thing is that vitamin C, if you have vitamin C, again, at the same site where the iron is and vitamin C at the absorption point, if you have that at the same time, they've seen that with iron, you absorb 200 to 300% more. Yeah. So now as well, things like, let's say, your peppers that you maybe have in your salad, which have vitamin C in, that is also helping absorb more of that iron.
Yeah, and I disclaimer, I didn't have a lot of organ meats and stuff, so I can imagine that my vitamin C levels were definitely deteriorating.
I think compared to how you're eating before, I think a bit less. Yeah. So that's why I'm not too surprised that it's come out, but it's only a smidge, it really isn't a concern. But what's interesting is your iron stores, your ferritin levels did go up, which is good. Good job. Now your transferrin levels have come down a little bit, which is actually quite interesting.
Yeah, I'm also a bit curious about this, why my transferrin would go down, how that works.
Yeah, that is interesting, because if you're looking at it objectively, your ferritin levels, your iron stores, you can almost think of it like there's a little bit more of an overflow that the body can store more of.
Yes.
So it is interesting. We normally we see a correlation that as ferritin levels go up, transferrin levels in saturation will go up. So that is going a little bit against the curve of what we expect it to be. However, if you had, which you don't because your CRP is low, but if you had a lot of inflammation, your ferritin levels can look falsely high.
I see.
So that it looks very high, like, oh wow, all the stores are going up, but the CRP's 1. So doubtful. So that is interesting. Yeah.
Interesting thing what I learned about the vitamin B12, because I had excess previously, That's how I learned I drank too much BioPlus.
Yes.
So since I wasn't having any BioPlus
Yeah.
and energy drinks over the past 6 weeks, my B12 levels normalized.
Normalized.
Yeah.
Yes. And even though meat is very high in B12, so it just makes sense. You have it a lot before now normalize the levels.
Yes,
so that's
so-
good. So from this standpoint, this does look very, very good
Okay,
overall.
happy to hear that.
So, I mean, the big thing is, even though the transferrin is low, the most important one is your iron. And the
Okay.
fact that that's still normal, we have to do.
Great.
Now, speaking about stats, would you like to do a scan
Yes.
and see what we're going to find? This is the same volume as 400 grams of muscle, and this is the same volume as 400 grams of fat. And I want you to guess. So this, how many of these do you think is out your body? Like if you had to visually just guess.
No, that's difficult. Okay, so I would say that maybe I lost maybe 2 kilos at most of fat, and maybe gained like a kilo of muscle. But that's
Okay.
all very much maybe.
Okay.
I don't know.
Oh.
Honestly.
You are almost spot on. So I want you to visualize you taking out. And if you don't believe me, I'll show you the numbers.
Okay.
You've lost 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of these.
Okay.
That's like an ice cream tub and a half of
Okay.
fat you've lost. And you've lost on the corporate like 2 kilograms of fat now. So well done. Really, really, really good stuff. So that's fantastic.
Okay, I'm happy to hear that.
And the other thing is your in-body score gives us a really good idea of have you improved overall from a health standpoint. Because someone can lose weight, someone can even lose fat mass, but we can sometimes see the points go down still. And that's because you might have lost too much muscle or water or glycogen, whatever it might be. And I expected you to go up by 2 points, and you've gone up by 2 points. So let me keep you out of suspense here. So if you're looking at the top here, so last time your score was 79 out of 100, really good on its own. Now you're 81 out of 100, so that's amazing. So that's 2.5 kilos down, basically, which is really good. But the muscle mass is almost exactly the same. Okay. Because also when you showed me, when we saw earlier just the exercise log, you were exercising, doing weights once or twice a week. You were in quite a calorie deficit. Okay. It's still above your basal metabolic rate, which you could still gain muscle. But like you said, your reps or intensity, almost you were doing higher reps. And you had limited time and you were only weight training once or twice a week. So the fact that, and 20% of the time you said you ate less, which means there's less, we'll talk about a positive nitrogen balance, so extra protein that your body can use to recover muscle. The fact that it's basically the same is a big victory. Okay, so just to say, I think to gain even half a kilogram, I think would be quite optimistic.
I understand. No, putting it into perspective, I'm like, okay, that makes sense.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
but do you think that this also has something to do with the glycogen stores, or not really?
That's a fantastic question. There's certain things that we need to look at, and it actually has to do mostly with your heart rate zones and where your glycogen levels are. That if this is now carbohydrates, this is now fat, and this is now protein. Now this is big averages here. Is that at rest, and then during exercise, and then as well post-exercise, is that at rest, how are we now sitting? About 25% of what we're burning is going to be carbohydrates, 60% is fat, so 35%, and protein is 5%. So essentially, most of what we're actually burning now as fuel is fat, either from what we've eaten or our own fat stores. But now, while we exercise, the amount of fat that we burn actually goes down because percentage-wise, is that carbohydrates we burn normally between 75 and 85%. So 65% over here, the average is 75. Is that 65% to 85% of what we're burning during exercise is actually goes up quite a lot, and then protein goes from 5 to 10%. So if we're working with an average of 75 and the protein 5%, that means the fat burning capability or percentage-wise that we're burning goes from 60% to 20%. Now, when we studied this, I was like, whoa, teacher, I think you've got it wrong. We all know that when we exercise, we should burn more fat mass, right? That's what we burn more fat, right? That's what we've all been told. That is correct over a 24-hour period. So just explain that, because the magic comes in that last block here. If you're looking at zone training, is that if you've got now your resting heart rate, which let's say for most people is 60 beats a minute, then you've got kind of 5 zones that you're kind of training. So now, the thing is we talk about zone 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So zone 5 is like sprint, so it's all out, super hectic. Then now you've got your kind of, like they talk about fat burning, not really if you look at this context, or fast walking. Then now you've kind of got this mix now, kind of, I'm going to draw kind of a dotted line between 4, 3, and 2, is that you've got your aerobic, and then you've got your anaerobic. So, for example, now if you go for a light jog, you're spending more time in your aerobic zone, and let's say if you're sprinting, we've done a heavy set, you've done lunges, you've done some pull-ups or whatever it might be, you've done burpees, then you're kind of out of breath, you're more going into your anaerobic state. Why this is crucial in answering your question is that zone 5 is here and zone 1 is here, meaning that the higher your intensity of exercise, the more carbohydrates you're using on a fuel source. But the carnivore diet doesn't have really carbohydrates. So what happens here and how can this affect muscle mass? So I'm going to have to draw another picture over here, and that is, now if you're looking at glycogen. So glycogen is the starch in your muscles. So let's say for you, your lower range is 130 grams, and your higher range is maybe 350 grams. So the analogy I like to use is with a glass of water, and that is that if this is 130 grams and this is 350, if I were to pour water in here, the more carbs that you're eating or starch or sugar that you get in, the higher your glycogen levels. But if you've been eating less carbohydrates or if you're training, your glycogen levels go down. So think about it almost as like your power bank, like let's say of energy for your for starch in your body. So now, to give an example of that, let's say, not on the carnivore diet, let's just say you've got a diet where you're having breakfast with carbs, lunch with carbs, and supper with carbs. Glycogen would do that fantastic. But now, if you have a lot of glycogen or a lot of starch at supper, let's say if you're having pizza, now you had, instead of 2 slices, you have 4 slices. Glycogen would go up. Then if you don't have starch at supper, or if you eat much less, your glycogen levels would come down. But what's interesting is that your glycogen levels are a little bit lower, but mostly the same as where you ended off. Now that's very important, because what's not happening is that you're not eating carbohydrates. So we would naturally expect that now, over following the diet after a few days, your glycogen levels should be on the lower range. And this is also why, not surprised you got a personal best in time when you started eating carbs again, because your glycogen levels are up. You was like, listen, we've got fuel, let's go. But now, what's happening is that since you're not eating carbohydrates, it's not that your glycogen levels would stay all the way down here. It would throughout the day, through process of gluconeogenesis, so how the liver now still makes glucose. Because if you still test your blood sugar levels, you'd still have sugar, but you ate no sugar. You had no starch, but that's just because your body can make glucose still. But now your glycogen levels would still not be high. It would still be mostly kind of in this box. Now, this is a very long answer to your question, I know. But it depends, because if you were doing very intense exercise for an extended period of time, your glycogen levels would drop quite quickly. Now the thing is, where does the body get glycogen from? The prime source is from what we've eaten, which is not eating carbohydrates really, or very limited at least. And then the second part is our glycogen. And the third part, from our carb standpoint, is that it is actually, this is the key thing that blew my mind when we studied this, is that it is quicker for your body while you are exercising to break down protein and convert it into glucose compared to fat. Now I found that interesting because we've heard, fasted cardio, and if you cut out all your carbs, you'll lose weight quicker. It's likely because you're losing a bit more protein, not necessarily fat. So to answer your question, if this was the case, that you were really kind of, let's say, abusing the glycogen system where you're training very hard, high intensity with no carbs, that would, even though your diet could be 90% protein, you're still likely to lose muscle. Okay. But however, because it wasn't very high intensity, instead of, let's say, being here, sounds like you were a little bit more over here, you were then using less carbohydrates, which means that the body could then burn a bit more fat mass over there. So this is 65, this is 5%, let's say this would now become 30%, but meaning that your body is less likely to break down protein. But now to just finish this off, is where do we then burn the fat? If the fat percentage drops off so much during exercise, where do we actually drop the fat mass? The thing is, let's say your glycogen levels come down here, your body doesn't want it to stay there. It wants your glycogen levels to come up. So either by the carbohydrates that you eat or because of gluconeogenesis, your carbohydrate levels would still come up, which means that this would drop to about 20-25%, protein would come back to 5% over here, and then let's say your fat, the percentage that you burn as fat, let's say for energy, is 75%. And you might say, look, all that work for only 15% more fat burn. Yes, that over 24 hours is actually where you burn most of that fat mass. So to answer your question is that if in context you were training really hard, you would still lose muscle. Good thing though that your intensity wasn't that intense, it's much less likely that your protein levels would come down.
What would the heart rate benchmark sort of be to gauge where on the 1 to 5?
Oh, that's a fantastic question. And luckily it is quite easy. Is that if this is 100%, 90, 80, 70, 60 percent of your maximum heart rate. And the kind of golden rule, it's not perfect, but it's 220 minus your age. So that's why I guess all in all, because you had a bit of a mixture of everything again, the fact that your muscle mass is where it is now is very good.
Okay.
Then if we're then looking here at your basal metabolic rate, is that, so even though it's come down by 8, look at the context here. That because you've lost weight, there's less of you to keep alive. So we actually expected your metabolism to drop by, 36, but it only dropped by 8. So in comparison, your metabolism is actually faster than it was before, even though it's lower from a number standpoint. And the fat on your organs has also come down, which is excellent. That's a big benefit. There you go, exceptional. Right, you've done really well. I must say that this is what I expected from this. Is that maintaining most of your muscle mass, most losing fat mass, and then bone minerals we expected to come down a bit, water weight as well. So this is good. So what is your comment on this?
No, I'm happy, and especially since it's exactly sort of what you expected as well. I wasn't sure what to expect here, but it's more or less in line with what my expectations were as well. It's now just a matter of sort of treating the next 6 weeks similar to what I treated the past 6 weeks. I think the results from here on out will be cumulative, and it won't be comparable really. But I am excited in general to know that my body responded well. It's not necessarily something I would do for 3 years like some people do. It's something that maybe can be utilized as a tool. But in general, I'm quite happy and pleased.
Good stuff. And speaking about how your body responds, is that going especially from no fiber, or very little fiber, to one of the highest fiber diets you get, is that please drink enough water, please chew your food properly, and please expect, almost like you can think of like a rebound compensatory method. In the first week, you are most likely going to be very bloated. And very windy, especially your first few stools might be a bit odd. So just expect that, and it should normalize. We normally see kind of like day 10, day 14, so kind of a week and a half, 2 weeks. Just to kind of help burden the load is that there's specific groups called fermentables, and a lot of it is things like let's say your cabbage and your baked beans over here, sauerkraut, which if you take from the beginning, you're probably going to get really bloated.
Okay.
So I'm going to put a list of that on the second page. And well, you can still definitely have those foods.
But just later on.
But you just know that if you've got a big presentation today, you don't want to look 18 months pregnant, maybe from day one, maybe avoid those foods.
Okay.
Then I'll see you again in 6 to 7 weeks' time. Any last questions you have for me?
No, not at all.
Okay, good stuff. Please make sure you drink enough water. Like,